January 7th, 1849. Natchez, Mississippi. Cold enough that the breath of animals hung in the air like ghosts. Cold enough that even the Mississippi River slowed to a crawl, ice forming along its black edges. This is where it happened. This is where a boy stopped being a boy. Issac. That was the name of the slave child who became something else entirely. Issac, 14 years old, skin the color of wet earth, eyes hard as iron filings. He belonged to the Carter plantation. At least that's what the papers said. But Issac didn't belong to anyone. Not really. Not anymore. The Carter house sat 3 miles from the Natchez Bluffs, a white-columned mansion sagging under winter frost. Smoke from its chimneys mixed with the smell of boiled pork and ash. In the yard, split logs stacked high. Beyond the yard, an ice house built of brick. A dark square bunker sunk into the ground, blocks of river ice stacked inside like teeth. Issac knew every creak of its door. He had carried the ice himself. He had touched the lock. He had counted the seconds it took for frost to crawl across his knuckles. Master William Carter liked things neat. His wife Eleanor liked things cruel. Their children, Matthew, Ruth, and baby Caleb, liked to watch Issac work. They threw apple cores at his back when he hauled the heavy baskets. They laughed when he slipped on frozen mud. They learned that cruelty was just another family tradition, like Sunday prayers and counting profits. Issac woke before dawn. The wooden floor of the slave quarters burned cold under his feet. Smell of damp straw, smell of iron shackles. He was quiet, always quiet. He didn't cry, he just moved. The other men called him Little Stone, because he never spoke unless spoken to, and when he did, his words landed like pebbles on glass, small but sharp. In the big house, he scrubbed floors, polished boots, emptied chamber pots. His hands were cracked, nails blackened, palms scarred by rope burns. Mistress Eleanor called him her silent boy. She said it like a compliment but used it like a weapon. Silence meant he wouldn't tell. Silence meant he wouldn't fight back. But Issac remembered every detail. He remembered his mother, Liza, dragged away down the road to be sold in Louisiana. He remembered his brother Thomas, beaten for stealing a biscuit, then disappeared into a trader's wagon. He remembered the smell of his father's sweat mixed with turpentine as they worked on the docks. He remembered every promise, every lie. The ice house sat at the edge of the yard, beneath cypress trees that dripped black water even in winter. Its door was thick oak, a single iron lock. Issac had seen Master William boast about it. Tighter than any jailhouse, Issac would look at that lock, fingers twitching at his sides. Not because he wanted to run, but because he wanted to know the cold gnawed at him. January wind cut through the thin cotton shirt he wore. He carried buckets of water, refilled troughs, emptied ash pans. Dogs barked at his heels, sensing something in him they couldn't name. He whispered his brother's name under his breath, a soundless prayer swallowed by the frost. Thomas, Thomas, Thomas. So that afternoon, while the Carter children played at the edge of the frozen pond, Issac hauled another load to the ice house. His breath came in white bursts. Inside, the air bit like knives. Blocks of ice glistened blue, stacked from floor to ceiling. He set the basket down, his fingers brushing the lock again. This time he didn't pull away. He thought of the Carter family's laughter. He thought of the whip curled like a snake on the wall of the barn. He thought of his mother's voice. He thought of silence, always silence. The plantation smelled of smoke and manure. Somewhere a hammer struck metal, the blacksmith shaping a plowshare. Somewhere a cow lowed. Somewhere beneath all that a clock ticked. Issac heard it, ticking through his skull like a heartbeat. Time moving, time running out. At dinner, Mistress Eleanor accused another servant of stealing sugar. She made Issac hold out his hands and poured boiling water across his knuckles to teach the others. He didn't scream. He didn't even flinch. He just watched the steam curl up, his skin blistering. And then he looked at the window where frost crawled like silver veins. He watched and he remembered. That night, after chores, Issac stood by the ice house door. Moonlight turned the frost white. His burned hands trembled, but his eyes stayed still. He leaned his forehead against the wood, feeling its coldness seep into his skull. In his mind, he saw the Carters inside, shivering. He saw his brother free. He saw his mother's face. He closed his eyes. A slave named Peter passed by and muttered, "Stone boy, you catching your death out here?" Issac didn't answer. He didn't move. He just pressed his palm flat against the door, feeling the thickness of it, the weight. Inside the big house, the Carters slept warm under quilts, fire snapping in the hearth. Outside, Issac stood in the dark, frost eating the edges of his vision. He remembered every name. He remembered every scar. He remembered the lock. The night deepened. The smell of wood smoke thickened. An owl called once from the cypress. Isaac stepped back from the icehouse door, his breath catching in his chest. He turned toward the quarters without looking back. But inside his head, a plan had already formed, clear as glass. Not because he was angry, but because something colder had taken root. Not revenge yet, just certainty. He didn't cry. He just stared at the icehouse door, already measuring its thickness. How far back do your own memories go? The smell of your first room? The sound of someone calling your name? Drop a comment below with the first memory you can still touch. And before we go deeper, make sure you've subscribed, because the next moments are heavy, and you're going to want to follow Isaac all the way to the end. Natchez, Mississippi, 1849. But Isaac's story starts years earlier downriver, where cypress knees rise from black water like the fingers of the drowned. He was born in Point Coupé Parish, Louisiana. His mother, Liza, named him for her father. She whispered it over and over while she nursed him. Isaac, Isaac, Isaac. He never forgot that rhythm. He remembered the smell of her dress, indigo dye and sweat. He remembered her voice, soft but firm, singing, "Hold fast, my boy." He remembered the way she said it on the day they came. The traders, chains, paperwork, lies. He's going to a good house, they told her. He'll be trained inside. They called it training. It was really breaking. Liza was sent one way, Isaac another. His brother Thomas, only 9, disappeared between wagons. Isaac's last sight of his mother was her face framed by Spanish moss, mouth open, but no sound coming out, her hands reaching. That silence became his inheritance. They took him upriver by flatboat, then wagon. 2 days, no food. 3 days chained to a man who coughed blood. At night, river fog crept into his lungs. He slept curled like a question mark, whispering his brother's name, Thomas, Thomas, Thomas. At Carter Plantation, the sky was bigger, the fields endless. Rows of cotton-like teeth. Overseer Jacob Hart met him at the gate, whip coiled on his hip. "You're the houseboy now," he said. Isaac looked at the man's boots, cracked and splattered with blood. He didn't answer. He didn't cry. He just stood there. The house smelled of turpentine and fried salt pork. Mistress Eleanor's eyes flicked over him like she was appraising furniture. She had a ring of keys at her waist that jingled when she walked. "You'll be silent," she told him. "Silent boys last." He nodded. He had already learned. Days bled into weeks. He swept, he polished, he emptied spittoons. At night, he slept on the floor by the kitchen hearth, heat licking one side of his face, cold gnawing the other. He dreamed of the river, dreamed of his mother's hands, dreamed of Thomas running across the levee calling his name. He began to catalogue the Carters' habits. William Carter drank late, left his boots by the door. Eleanor took sugar in her tea, locked the pantry at night. The children left marbles on the stairs. The icehouse door stuck if you didn't pull hard enough. Isaac filed it all away, not because he had a plan, but because memory was the only power he owned. In the fields, the other enslaved people noticed him. Peter called him Stone Boy. Rosa whispered, "He's marked, that one." They saw the way he watched the Carters, eyes like a hawk. They saw him trace the lock of the icehouse with a fingertip, again and again like a prayer bead. Sometimes in the evenings, Isaac walked to the edge of the cypress swamp. He picked up stones and threw them into the black water, each splash a name. Liza, Thomas, Liza, Thomas. He thought if he repeated them enough, the river would give them back. The river didn't. One night, Overseer Jacob Hart caught Thomas's friend Samuel stealing a sweet potato, beat him until the handle of the whip broke. Isaac saw it from the kitchen window. He held the edge of the sill until his knuckles went white. He didn't cry. He just whispered Thomas into the dark. Mistress Eleanor began to trust him, or thought she did. She sent him to the icehouse alone. She let him carry the keys sometimes. He learned the weight of them, the feel of the iron against his palm. He learned which ones clicked smoothly, which ones stuck. He learned how cold the door felt even on a warm day. On Sundays, the Carters went to town. Isaac stayed behind with the other servants. He walked through the empty halls, touching the walls like he was blind, memorizing every inch. He stared at the portraits of dead carters, their painted eyes following him. He stood before the ice house and listened to his own breathing, slow, measured like a clock. One day, Mistress Eleanor slapped him for moving too slowly. His lips split. Blood tasted like copper. She said, "Say sorry." He didn't. She raised her hand again. He stared at her, not because he was defiant, but because something colder had started to form behind his eyes. She dropped her hand and turned away, uneasy. At night, he dreamt of ice, thick, glittering, suffocating. He dreamt of locks closing. He woke with his hands clenched, nails digging crescents into his palms. He started to keep a rusted nail under his mat, running his fingers over it until his skin toughened. Small things, quiet things. He began to understand what they had done. They hadn't just taken his body. They had taken his family, his future, his sound. But memory was still his. Memory and silence. Silence was a blade if you held it right. He watched the Carters age in winter light. William's hands cracked from frost. Eleanor's cheeks chapped. The children coughed. He carried firewood for them, filled their basins, poured their water. He touched the ice house door every time. The frost burned his fingers, but he kept touching. He wanted the burn. It reminded him he was still there. By December of 1848, he no longer thought of running. He thought of staying. He thought of the ice house. He thought of Thomas's name as a key, turning. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't write anything. He just remembered. He remembered the cold, the faces, the key ring, the weight of the door. He remembered the sound of Samuel's ribs breaking under the whip. He remembered the silence afterward. He remembered the promise they broke to his mother. He remembered the look on Eleanor's face when he didn't say sorry. That memory was the seed. The ice house was the soil. Winter was coming. That night, as sleet rattled against the shutters, Isaac slipped out to the edge of the yard. He pressed his forehead against the ice house door, whispered his mother's name, whispered his brother's name. He counted the seconds. He listened to his own breath. He didn't cry. He just stood there, frost climbing his burned knuckles, whispering, "Thomas, Thomas, Thomas." Before we go on, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city below, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to follow Issac into the coldest night of his life. Natchez, Mississippi, February 1849. The sky a low lid of iron pressing down on the plantation, cold so sharp it cracked fence rails. Breath of horses hanging white and trembling. Everything brittle, everything ready to break. Isaac woke to the sound of crying. The kitchen girl, Rosa, had been caught smuggling a scrap of cornbread to her baby. Mistress Eleanor's voice carried like a whip across the yard. Isaac stayed still, hands in the basin, water black with soot. He heard the slap, the scream, the baby's thin wail. He dried his hands slowly. He didn't rush. He didn't breathe. He walked outside and saw Eleanor holding a poker from the hearth, its tip glowing orange. Rosa on her knees. Overseer Jacob Hart grinning. Isaac froze. The smell of scorched wood and fear wrapped around him. He could see the ice house door from where he stood, frost glinting like teeth. He could feel the nail under his mat in his pocket, digging into his palm. Mistress Eleanor looked at Isaac. "Bring me water," she said, as if nothing were happening. He did. She dipped the poker into the bucket, steam screaming up. Then she pressed the metal close to Rosa's cheek, stopping an inch away, laughing. Jacob Hart spit on the ground. The baby cried harder. Isaac stood there, not because he wanted to, because his legs wouldn't move. That night, Rosa's face was a shadow in the kitchen, her cheek burned but not blistered. Isaac watched her rock the baby with trembling hands. "They'll take him from me," she whispered. Isaac didn't answer. He didn't know what to say. He only knew something in him had shifted. Not because of Rosa, but because of what he saw in Eleanor's eyes. Delight, power, no trace of doubt. He lay awake on the kitchen floor. Firelight flickered on the ceiling beams. He could hear the river ice cracking outside, a sound like bones. He took the nail from under his mat and scratched a line into the floorboard. Then another. Then another. One for Liza, one for Thomas, one for Samuel, one for Rosa's baby. Lines like ribs, like tally marks, like bars. Next morning, snowflakes blew sideways across the yard. Dogs pawed at the frozen ground. Issac was sent to the icehouse again. His burned knuckles stuck to the iron latch. He forced them free, skin peeling. Inside, blocks of ice towered like walls of a fortress. He set down the basket and just stood there, cold biting through his shirt. He whispered, "Not because I can, because I must." He began to gather little things. The rusted nail bent into a pick, a thin piece of wire from the workshop. He studied the hinges on the icehouse door. He measured the footsteps of William Carter at night. He noted which windows in the big house stuck shut. He learned the children's bedtime. He memorized how Eleanor twisted the keys when she was angry. One afternoon, Mistress Eleanor ordered Isaac to light the fire in the nursery. He walked up the stairs carrying logs, his burned hands trembling. Baby Caleb slept under a quilt. Ruth played with a wooden horse. Matthew threw a marble at Isaac's back. Isaac didn't react. He stacked the logs. He looked at the window. Frost thick as lace. He thought of ice sealing a door. He stopped sleeping through the night. He would rise and walk to the icehouse, stand before it, counting his heartbeats. Sometimes he would imagine the Carters inside. He would picture their faces turning blue, lips cracking, eyes wide. Then he would imagine Thomas standing beside him, watching. He would whisper, "One for every name." The plantation changed as winter deepened. Chickens died in their coops. Pipes froze. Even William Carter wore 2 coats. He cursed Isaac for slow work, threw a cup at his head. Isaac ducked, silent. He didn't cry. He just filed it away. The turning point came on a Sunday night. William had been drinking. Jacob Hart too. They argued over cotton weights. Then Jacob backhanded Isaac for being in the way. Isaac hit the floor hard, tasted blood. He stayed down. He heard William laugh. He heard Eleanor say, "He's no use if he's broken." He stayed down, but something inside stood up. Right then, he rose slowly, eyes lowered. He went back to his chores. But in his chest, a door swung open, not because he was humiliated, but because humiliation had become fuel. He could feel his mother's hands. He could smell the river. He could hear the ice cracking. He could see the lock. That night, he didn't go back to the kitchen floor. He went to the icehouse. He opened the door, stepped inside, and closed it behind him. Darkness and cold swallowed him. He stayed there, eyes open, fingers tracing the lock from the inside. He counted how long before his breath turned painful. He practiced silence. He practiced waiting. He practiced being the cold. When he finally stepped out, frost rimmed his eyelashes. His lips were blue, but his heart was steady. He didn't cry. He didn't pray. He just touched the door one more time and whispered, "Thomas." He began to speak less, even to Peter and Rosa. He began to eat less, conserving his strength. He began to move through the house like a shadow. Eleanor noticed. "You're too quiet," she said. "I like it." He nodded, eyes on the floor. He was already gone in a way she couldn't see. At dawn a few days later, he stole back into the icehouse with a wooden wedge hidden under his shirt. He pressed it against the doorframe, testing how the door would jam if struck from outside. He replaced it carefully. No one saw. Dogs barked but didn't approach. He whispered, "One for every scar." He rehearsed it in his mind, night after night. Who would be first through the door? Where the key would be? How long the screaming would last? He didn't flinch from the images. They were cold like the ice, cold enough to keep. He didn't tell Rosa, he didn't tell Peter, he didn't tell anyone. Silence was his ally now, thicker than any chain. As the first week of March came, the weather dipped again. Ice crusted the river. Frost climbed the window panes like claws. Isaac walked past the icehouse and laid his palm on the door. His heart didn't race. It slowed, measured, certain. He was no longer waiting for rescue. He was no longer hoping for kindness. He was no longer a boy. He didn't cry. He just stood there, eyes on the lock, whispering the names like a spell. Liza, Thomas, Samuel, Rosa, baby Caleb. Where are you watching this? What's the temperature where you are right now? Drop a comment below, because tonight's story is about cold so deep it isn't weather anymore. It's a weapon. Before we open the icehouse door, make sure you're subscribed. You won't want to miss what happens next. Natchez, Mississippi, March 12, 1849, midnight. moon like a tarnished coin, sky low and swollen with snow, the river frozen at its edges, wind moving through the cypress trees like a whisper of dead names, the plantation asleep except for Issac. Issac moves through the dark yard barefoot, silent. Thin shirt plastered to his back with sweat and frost. In his pocket, a sliver of wire. In his hands, a wooden wedge. His breath a slow cloud. He is not running. He is not sneaking. He is moving like a clock hand, sure, inevitable. Inside the big house, the Carters are awake. The storm has rattled them. William Carter hears a noise in the Icehouse. Isaac made sure of it. A thud, a clatter, a whispered cry. Enough to wake them. Enough to make Eleanor grip her shawl and tell William to check. Isaac stands by the Icehouse door, eyes lowered, hands trembling just enough to sell the act. I heard something, he whispers. By the Icehouse, William curses. Get the lantern, he orders Eleanor. She wakes Matthew, Ruth clinging to her skirts, baby Caleb bundled in a quilt. They all come. They all follow. The lantern light swings across the yard, casting long shadows on snow. Dogs whine in their kennels, sensing the wrongness. Peter watches from the slave quarters, sees Isaac leading them, wonders but says nothing. The night smells of iron and ash. They reach the Icehouse. William pushes past Isaac, throws the door open. Lantern light spills into the dark, glinting off ice blocks stacked like tombstones. What's in here? William barks. Eleanor shivers, holding Ruth and the baby. Matthew peers in, eyes wide. Isaac stands behind them, silent. Not a boy now. A door, a trap, a coldness walking. William steps inside first, lantern high. Eleanor follows, muttering about rats. Matthew hesitates, then enters. Ruth last, dragging the baby's quilt. All of them inside, all of them framed by frost. Isaac sees the lantern flame shudder, hears the echo of their footsteps on frozen floor. He steps back, heartbeat steady. He swings the door shut. The sound is a dull, heavy clap. Frosted wood meeting frost. The lantern flickers inside. Eleanor's voice, Isaac? William's shout, boy! Isaac slides the wooden wedge into place, jams it under the latch, locks the padlock with the spare key he stole weeks ago. Click, final, irrevocable. The noise inside swells, fists on the door, shouting, the baby crying. Eleanor's voice high with disbelief. William pounding. Matthew screaming. Ruth sobbing. Isaac stands there, hands on the wood, feeling the vibration of their panic through the grain. He doesn't cry. He doesn't answer. He just whispers names. Liza, Thomas, Samuel, Rosa. His breath fogs the door. He closes his eyes. Each name like a nail in the wood. Inside, William curses. He throws his shoulder against the door. The Icehouse walls swallow the sound. Frost creeps thicker. The lantern light dimmer. Eleanor screams Isaac's name now, screams promises and threats. He steps back. Dogs bark wild in their kennels. The cypress trees shudder. Isaac walks away. Snow crunches under his feet. The wind bites his face. He doesn't run. He doesn't look back. In the slave quarters, Peter presses his face to the window, eyes wide. Rosa rocks her baby, whispering prayers. No one moves. No one calls out. The night belongs to Issac now. Inside the Icehouse, the Carters pound and pound. Their breath condenses on the walls. Ice melts, drips, refreezes. The baby's cries fade to hiccups. Eleanor sobs. William roars. Matthew claws at the door with fingernails until they break. Isaac keeps walking. He crosses the yard to the edge of the cypress swamp. He feels the nail in his pocket, still there. He touches the scar on his knuckle, where Eleanor poured boiling water. He feels nothing. Not because he's numb, because he's decided. The plantation is a silhouette behind him now, house and Icehouse both shadows against the white night. He can still hear the muffled pounding faintly, but it's already far away, like a memory dissolving. He whispers, one for every scar, one for every name. He reaches the swamp. The wind howls through the reeds. He kneels and dips his hands in the black water, letting the cold burn. He looks up at the stars. They look back hard and bright. He breathes once, twice. Then he stands and walks into the dark, heading for the river road. Back at the Icehouse, the lantern sputters out. Darkness, only the sound of fists. Only the cold. Only silence gathering like a tide. He doesn't cry. He doesn't pray. He just moves away from the sound, each step an echo of the ones that brought him here. Frost gathers on his eyelashes. Snow melts on his cheeks and refreezes. His heart beats steady. His silence a blade. Where are you right now? Have you ever walked into a room so cold your breath turned into glass? Leave a comment telling us your coldest memory, because tonight, Natchez wakes to a silence no one can explain. Make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next is not folklore. It's record. It's fact dawn, March 13th, 1849. The sun lifts pale and thin over the river. Frost on the cane fields, the cypress swamp smoking in the early light. Dogs pacing and whining, their noses pointing toward the icehouse. A rooster calls once, then again. Silence swallows it. Peter is the first to see it. The icehouse door warped with cold, padlock still sealed. He doesn't go closer. He knows. Rosa's hand tightens on his arm. She whispers Issac's name once, like a prayer, then again like a curse. Smoke from the chimneys rises slow, but the big house is silent. No movement, no carriage, no Eleanor at the window. By mid-morning, the plantation is awake and panicked. Overseer Collins shouts orders. Men with axes run to the icehouse. They strike the door, splintering wood, hacking through the wedge. Each blow a drumbeat. Each swing another second lost. The dogs bark wild. Inside, silence. Then, as the last splinter gives, the smell hits. Iron, sweat, frozen milk, and death. The lantern on the floor burned itself out hours ago, leaving only a blackened wick. Frost clings to every surface. Eleanor, William, Matthew, Ruth, and baby Caleb sit in a huddled knot, locked in their final positions, eyes rimmed with ice, their breath frozen into a crystalline rime on the walls. Collins backs away, crossing himself. Peter looks once, then turns his face to the ground. Rosa whispers, "Liza, Thomas, Samuel, Rosa." The same names Isaac whispered into the wood. No one speaks for a long time. The sound of the axe hitting the floor echoes. Word spreads fast. By noon, Natchez is a whispering town. "The boy," someone says. "The Carter boy." "He did it," another voice. "Icehouse." All of them. Names repeat. Issac's name. Carter's name. The Icehouse's name. People spit, people pray, people go silent. Sheriff McBride arrives by horse, 2 deputies behind him. His breath white, his coat heavy. He looks at the bodies, then at the footprints leading from the icehouse toward the swamp. Bare footprints, small, direct. He spits in the snow. "Find him," he says. A manhunt forms. Hounds brought from Vicksburg. Men with muskets and lanterns combing the cypress swamp. Issac moves ahead of them, silent as always. He knows the reeds. He knows the water. He knows where the mud will suck a man's boots down and where it will let a boy pass like a shadow. They find the first sign at noon, a scrap of cloth snagged on a thorn, a thin shirt soaked and stiff. They follow prints until they vanish in the black water. "He can't swim the river," one deputy mutters. "Too cold. He'll drown." McBride shakes his head. "He ain't drowning." Not that one. Issac moves along the river edge, hiding under cypress knees through moss and mud. The sound of hounds behind him, faint but closing. He doesn't run. He moves like a slow heartbeat. In his mind, the names keep circling. Liza, Thomas, Samuel, Rosa, each name a step. Each name a guide, night again. The swamp alive with insect clicks and owl cries. Torches flicker in the distance. Issac hides in a hollow log, knees to his chest. He listens to the men pass, their boots sucking at the mud. A deputy says, "Little bastard's gone. Gone with the river." Another laughs nervously. They move on. By morning, the trail ends. McBride calls it off. "Code'll take him if the river don't," he says, but his eyes say otherwise. Issac is gone, vanished into the woods or the river or the night itself. But not dead. People will claim to see him for years, crossing a road at dawn, standing by a frozen creek. Always barefoot, always silent. Back at the plantation, the bodies are buried in a single trench. No priest, no prayers. Collins nails the icehouse door shut for good. The hounds whine at its threshold, pawing the ground. Rosa watches from the quarters, baby on her hip, eyes like 2 black coals. Peter mutters, "He did what we all dreamed." No one answers. By the end of the month, the Carter plantation is sold off. Fields left to weed and cypress. The icehouse collapses under a storm 2 summers later. Only the foundation remains, stone slick with moss. Locals call it the cold house, and children dare each other to touch it at midnight. Issac becomes a whisper. Not a boy, not a runaway, a force. The story told in cabins and taverns, passed from mouth to mouth. Remember Issac, they say. Remember what he did. Some call him a murderer. Some call him a deliverer. Some just call him the boy who locked the door and walked away. He didn't cry. He didn't pray. He just acted. The ice wasn't for storing food. It was for vengeance. The door wasn't a door. It was a blade. The night wasn't weather. It was a witness. And if you think this story ends here, it doesn't. Because every time the river freezes at its edges, every time wind cuts through the cypress like a blade, every time a barefoot boy vanishes into the swamp, someone whispers Isaac's name, and the silence answers back. This is the true story of Issac of Natchez, the boy who turned cold into a weapon, the boy who left the door shut, the boy who walked away. If this story chills you, it's because it's about memory, fire, blood, and silence, and the way even the smallest hands can hold history's throat. Subscribe and share with those who know what it means to lock the door and walk away.